Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and we'll be learning today Miras Hashem Daf Yodalid Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn Erev Shabbos. We've been learning Siman Reish Mem Tes, Dinam Hashayachim Erev Shabbos, the halachas that pertain to Erev Shabbos and to properly preparing for Shabbos. We're holding in the middle of Sif Beis. We're going to pick up today on Yodalid Amid Aleph, the last two words on the page in the Shulchan Aruch, V'lechel V'lishtais. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Hanusuna Batzara Bashivya Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha Hamakayim Yerachem Aleihem V'yitzim Yitzar Levracha Me'afelu L'Oira U'mishibed L'Geula Hashta Bagala V'zman Kariv V'naimar Amen. Against that backdrop, I just want to make mention of something. I'm actually saying this share on Erev Shabbos Parsha Shlach, very much in Yonah D'Yoma, talking here about the halachas of Erev Shabbos, but also going into Parsha Shlach, where we learn about the Meraglim and the unfortunate lack of Emunah and B'tachon that was displayed by Klal Yisrael in sending the Meraglim, in reacting to the Meraglim. I just feel very much that I want to make the point, with everything that's going on in the world, all the news that we hear from Eretz Yisrael, from around the world as well, there's a lot of chatter, and a lot of people are busy speaking about American politics, Israeli politics, Bibi Netanyahu, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Chuck Schumer, and people are very involved in it. Who's better for Eretz Yisrael? Who's worse for Eretz Yisrael? Why did this person say that? Why did that person say that? What's going to be with this? What's going to be with that? It's very important for us to remember, the only one that we could put our faith in is the Rabbeinu Shalom, nobody else. Truth is that the Rishiva Zatzal, Rav Moshe Zechet Tzaddik Kodesh Levracha, used to say that when it comes to elections, it really doesn't matter who wins. It makes no difference at all. Why? Because it's a pasuk, Leiv Malachim V'Sarim B'Yad Hashem. And the truth is that I've seen this already in my lifetime. Really doesn't matter what a candidate says, because Kol Zman the candidate is a candidate. He has his own mind to at least some extent. He could say whatever he wants. He could stake out whatever policy positions he wants to stake out. But the minute he wins the election, or the minute he actually becomes the president, now the pasuk of Leiv Malachim V'Sarim B'Yad Hashem applies to him. And now he doesn't even have his own das. He really doesn't have his own das at all. Leiv Malachim V'Sarim B'Yad Hashem. And I mean, I could give you one classic case of this. I'll never forget, it was George Bush II, when he was running for president. He would make a big deal out of the fact that the United States is not going to be busy doing nation building. That was a refrain that he spoke about many times. We have to get away from this nation building and getting involved in wars in other countries and this and that. Then 9/11 happened. And I'm not sure anybody set out to be more of a nation builder than he ended up doing. For right, for wrong, for better, for worse, doesn't matter. It's not where I'm going with this. I'm just saying, you see how just Leiv Malachim V'Sarim B'Yad Hashem, let's not get lost. Let's not get tied up in all of this. What's for us to do is Torah mitzvahs. And tefillah, Rabbi say. We have to be mispal. We have to turn to the Rabbeinu Shalom 3 times a day and beseech the Rabbeinu Shalom and tell the Rabbeinu Shalom that we put our faith in Him and Him alone. I told people when in the beginning of the Milchama in Eretz Yisrael, when the Gross United States sent the USS Gerald Ford to the Mideast, and it was a symbol of Gevurah, a symbol of the might of the United States. L'cha Hashem hagedula v'hagevurah. They say, one of the pshatim that they say in the pasuk, L'cha Hashem hagedula v'hagevurah v'teferes v'hanetzach v'hahoid. We don't even know what Gevurah means when it comes to the Rabbeinu Shalom. We don't have a concept of Gevurah. Well, what do we know about Gevurah? The Gevurah of the Rabbeinu Shalom is beyond comprehension. But we can see symbols of Gevurah in the world. So it is incumbent upon us that when we see a symbol of Gevurah, when you see pictures or video of the USS Gerald Ford sailing in the Mediterranean, the reaction has to be, no. L'cha Hashem hagedula v'hagevurah. The Rabbeinu Shalom has Gevurah. There is no Gevurah. There is no Gedula other than Bari Olam. Okay, now Nachzar L'Inyanenu. So here in Siman Reish Mem Tes and Sif Beis, the Mechaber introduced a halacha to us. The Mechaber opened up Sif Beis by telling us, Asur l'kbaya be'erev Shabbos seudah u'mishta she'ena ragel b'mei ha'choil. There is an isser. We have to be careful what we eat on Erev Shabbos. Why? The Mechaber told us because of Kavod Shabbos, she'yikanis l'Shabbos kushu toiv lechol. We're supposed to come to a Shabbos seudah Friday night with an appetit. We have to come with a great appetite. We have to sit down to the seudah with a geschmack. That's proper Kavod Shabbos. Not that we sit down to the seudah Friday night. Who's hungry? I ate so much today. That wouldn't be Kavod Shabbos. Mishnah Berurah mentioned another reason. Mishnah Berurah said if you're going to be busy with an extravagant, substantial seudah on Erev Shabbos, that's going to entail preparation. That preparation is going to take away from the preparations for Shabbos. So we saw this halacha where we have to regulate and be careful how we eat on Erev Shabbos. And the measurement that the Mechaber gave us so far is, you don't sit down to be kevei seudah, which we said means not kebeitzam and a pas. It means you don't sit down to a meal on Erev Shabbos that's more extravagant or more substantial than the type of meal that you would generally eat during the week. If during the week you eat a tuna fish sandwich for lunch, on Erev Shabbos you could eat a tuna fish sandwich for lunch. If on Tuesday for breakfast you have a bowl of oatmeal, gesundheit, have a bowl of oatmeal Friday morning. If you have 2 slices of rye bread and 2 scrambled eggs, fine, gesundheit, have that. But don't sit down on Erev Shabbos and have an everything bagel with lox and 2 scrambled eggs and an iced coffee and a slice of cheesecake for dessert, if that's not what you typically do during the week. Erev Shabbos is not the time to go ahead and make a more substantial seudah than you would normally make during the week. Now continues the Mechaber, last 2 words on Yudalet Amud Aleph. However, v'lechol v'lishtois bali kviyas seudah, to eat on Erev Shabbos without kviyas seudah, to sit down, to go, you're in the kitchen, you're preparing, you're making the cholent, you're making the chicken soup, you're making the fish. You want to eat on Erev Shabbos, you want to take a piece of cake, you want to taste some of this, you want to taste some of that. There's no restrictions on that. We're not telling you that you have to watch how many calories you eat on Erev Shabbos. We're not telling you how many kizesim you could eat on Erev Shabbos. What we're worried about is to sit down to a significant meal. So v'lecha v'lishtois bali kviyas seudah. Or, says the Mechaber, afilu seudah sheragel ba b'choil. Or, the Mishnah Berurah understands this as saying, or, even to take a bikaveh seudah, even to take a sit down to a full-fledged meal. Like I said, the tuna fish sandwich, or the scrambled eggs that you normally eat during the week. Afilu seudah sheragel ba b'choil. Kol hayoim mutar lahaschil min adin. Such meals you could eat at any point min adin on Erev Shabbos. Aval, however, mitzvah, there is a distinct mitzvah for Kavod Shabbos. Lihimana milikbaya seudah shenog ba b'choil. There is a mitzvah to refrain from sitting down and being kevei seudah, even the type of seudah that you would eat during the week, mitesha shoyis ulamayla, from 9 hours into the day and later. And we'll detail that time period a little bit later in the shire, just explain to you exactly when that time period is. Now, even though I'm going out of order over here, I just want to jump right away to a short little biur halacha over here, which is most of the way down the page. Biur halacha dibra maschel milikbaya seudah. The Mechaber just told us there is a mitzvah to refrain from being kevei seudah, even the type of seudah that you would eat during the week. There's a mitzvah to refrain from that from 9 hours into the day and later. So when we look at everything that the Mechaber has told us, the Mechaber told us what's aser. It's aser to eat a seudah that's more substantial, more extravagant than the type of seudah that you normally eat during the week. What's mutar? What's mutar is lechol v'lishtois bali kviyas seudah, to eat and drink without sitting down to a meal, no restrictions. Do what you want. Even to eat a normal seudah, the type that you eat during the week, that's also mutar, min adin. But to be kevei seudah, a normal type of seudah that you would eat during the week, is a mitzvah lihimana, it's a mitzvah to refrain from that, mitesha shoyis ulamayla. Says the biur halacha, this mitzvah that the Mechaber just said How exactly do we understand that? If we just read the mechaber, it sounds like I told you that any type of meal that you sit down to normally during the week, you could eat that at any point during the day. Then I told you that there's a mitzvah to refrain from that. Mitesha shoyi salamayla. Bir Halacha says the type of seudah that it's a mitzvah to refrain from is not exactly the type of seudah that he said is really mutar min adin. Says the Bir Halacha, milikbaya seudah, hainu lechol pas kidei svia kirigilusai b'chol. To sit down with a seudah al hapas of the type that you normally eat during the week, that's a mitzvah to refrain from Tesha Shoyi Sulamayla. Now this is the first time in this Siman that we've seen any reference to Kfiyas Seudah al hapas. The Mishnah Berurah did not say, the Bir Halacha did not say, anywhere over here in the beginning of Sif Beis, he didn't talk about Kfiyas Seudah al hapas. That's why I told you at the outset of Sif Beis, when we're talking about Kfiyas Seudah over here, we're not talking about Kibetzim and hapas. We're talking about sitting down to a meal. So based on this Bir Halacha, what seems to really come out to me is like this. The type of breakfast, the type of lunch that you normally eat on a regular day during the week, you're allowed to do that all day long. Snack, you're allowed to do that all day long. What is there a mitzvah to refrain from? The mitzvah that there is to refrain from Tesha Shoyi Sulamayla is to sit down to be Kaveya Seudah al hapas. Even if it's Kfiyas Seudah al hapas, that's not more extravagant than what you normally do during the week. But it's Kfiyas Seudah al hapas, that is a mitzvah lihimana mitesha shoyis ulamayla. Now let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah is cut in Yodalit, begins on Yodalit Amud Aleph, at least in my print. V'lecha v'lishta, he says the Chavetz Chaim, the mechaber is telling you that there's a heter, lechol v'lishtais, you could eat and drink without Kfiyas Seudah, without sitting down to a meal, kind of like snacking on this, snacking on that you could do all day long. Says the Mishnah Berurah, this is not a blanket heter. Ve'ein b'chlal zeh, what we do not include in this is, in mushoyse kol kach harbe mine mashke. Somebody has a drinking party, somebody sits down and he drinks so many different types of beverages, ad sheyeh saveya, until it mamish fills him up. You can become bloated from drinking too much. That's not mutter. That definitely impinges on one's appetite. It definitely diminishes the appetite. And our senses tell us that that's true. Right? It's baduk u'menusa. If you drink too much, it's hard to eat afterwards. And sometimes, says the Chavetz Chaim, if you're talking about drinking intoxicating beverages, people drink intoxicating beverages and they drink too much, they could lose the entire Friday night seudah because they get drunk and then they go to bed, they fall asleep on the living room couch, and they miss everything. They could miss davening too. And then there's mamish no covered Shabbos. There's no Shabbos seudah at all. And therefore, says the Chavetz Chaim, there definitely would be a mitzvah to refrain from such extensive drinking, certainly mitesha shoyis ulamayla. I have to mention over here just another bitter asik that comes around nowadays, and the complaints have come to me from wives who will turn around and say that Shabbos afternoon, my husband comes home after davening and after Kiddush, and Kiddush number 1, and Kiddush number 2, and Kiddush number 3, and he's so full and he's so high that there is no Shabbos seudah. Because he already had 3 bowls of cholent and 6 different types of kugel and 4 portions of herring and scotch and bourbon and everything else. And not only does he come home full, he comes home tipsy. And he comes home, and he falls asleep, and I have a seudah Shabbos with my kids without my husband. Such things cannot happen. And people have to be very careful from these kind of things. And I wish it would be in the hands of somebody to tamp down the level of Kadeshim that we have nowadays and the extravagance of it. It's much too much, Rabbi say. Weiter. Ice cut tesvav. So the words of the mechaber over here were afilu seudah sharagel babachayil. The Mishnah Berurah explains what the mechaber means here. Hainu k'may ve'afilu. Really, properly, there should be a vav over here. Ve'afilu seudah sharagel babachayil. The mechaber is coming to be matir, another thing over here. What the mechaber wants to say is I just told you that lecha v'lishta is b'li kviya seudah. that's mutter. A piece of kugel, a piece of cake while you're in the kitchen. No kviyas seudah. You're not sitting down to a meal. You're just snacking during the day. That, the Mechaber said, is 100% mutter, and there isn't even a mitzvah lihimana. You don't have to say on Erev Shabbos while you're in the kitchen preparing for Shabbos, I shouldn't take another piece of kugel. That we don't see. So that's vade mutter kol hayom va'afilu mitzvah lihimana gam keleka. Now the Mechaber is saying va'afilu b'kviyas seudah, but even a kviyas seudah, even to sit down to a meal, even to sit down to lunch, as long as kemen she'ena oisa seudah rechava, as long as you're not making an extravagant meal, you're making the normal type of meal that you eat during the week, mutter kol hayom min adin. That's mutter min adin. Ava mitzvah lihimana. It's a mitzvah to refrain from being kaveh seudah, which we saw in the Bir Halacha. He's saying is kaveh seudah lapas. But if you did sit down, you washed to sit down to eat during the day on Erev Shabbos, even late, even after Teisha Shois, you're not mechuyev to be mafsik. Ice cutting your zayim, Teisha Shois l'mayla. From 9 hours and more into the day. Says the Mishnah Berurah, when we talk about hours, hainu sha'os zmaniyos, these are what we refer to in English, generally speaking, as proportional hours. What are sha'os zmaniyos? Well, according to the Gra, we take the time of nets of sunrise, and we count the minutes from sunrise until shkia, until sunset, right? We divide it into 12. We make proportional hours. So these are not 60-minute hours, right? We take the amount of minutes from sunrise to sunset, divide it by 12, and now you're going to have proportional hours. So that's how we calculate the 9 hours over here. Now, I said I'm recording this on Erev Shabbos Parsha Shlach. So if you want to know when 9 hours would come out today, at least here in New York, nets was 5:30. So sunrise was 5:30. Shkia is 8:31. So we're from 5:30 in the morning to 8:31 in the evening. If you do the math, it comes out a drop over 75 minutes to an hour. So a proportional hour today would be a 75-minute hour. Now, mincha ketana is 9.5 hours into the day. So that's 2.5 hours before Shkia. But again, it shows maniyos, not 60-minute hours, 75-minute hours. So today, mincha ketana is 5:23. But mincha ketana is 9.5 hours into the day. We want a half an hour earlier than that. A half an hour shows maniyos. We don't want 9.5 hours into the day. We want 9 hours into the day. So if a shazmaniyos is about 75 minutes, so a half is be'erich 38 minutes. So 38 minutes before that would be 4:45. So today, you want to know halacha l'maisa today. When should you refrain from being kaveh seudah? Today, that would be at 4:45. So that puts it in perspective, right? So shkia is 8:31 today. So licht is about 8:21 is licht. After 4:45 today, you should not properly, mitzvah lihimana, you should not sit down, wash, be kaveh seudah ala pas, even if it's a type of seudah that you would eat during the week, mitzvah lihimana for kavod Shabbos. Let's continue the Mishnah Berurah over here. It's cutting Yud Zayin. So hainu shois maniyos, we're talking about shois maniyos, v'hu revias hayom ad halayla, we're talking about a little bit around a quarter of the day before the night, meaning 3/4 into the day. So now the Mishnah Berurah says like this. The Mechaber is telling me, when do we have this mitzvah lihimana? We have this mitzvah lihimana after Teisha Shois. That's when we have the mitzvah lihimana. So again, a half an hour shois maniyos before mincha ketana, right? That's when we have the mitzvah lihimanos. But says the Mishnah Berurah, become hakim nira dive ma'isa cherif during the winter. Bezman shahayamim kitzarim ma'oid. When we're talking about very short days, right? We know that at least here in the New York area, when you go in the winter, you can have licht at 4:30. So the Erev Shabbos is very, very short. Are we going to make the same calculation? Are we going to say that the time that you have to stop eating is a half hour before minhag tana? Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. Then mitzvah lihimana melikpoya seudah haragila afilu kaidim teisha shois. On a very short Erev Shabbos, you should refrain from being kaveh seudah even earlier than teisha shois. Kolshu mishar benafshoy shal yedei zeh lo yeh tov lecha balayla. On a short Erev Shabbos, you have to ask yourself already, maybe at 12 o'clock, or maybe even 11:30 in the morning. You have to ask yourself, if I eat now, am I going to eat with an appetite tonight? Because remember, the Friday night seudah is going to be very early. So you have to be careful not to eat even a seudah regila if it's already at a point in the day where it's going to affect your appetite for that night. Okay, now let's move on to Sif Gimel, near the end of the second line in the Mechaber, here on Yudal and Beis. Says the Mechaber, an interesting thing. Derech Anshe Maisa, it was the derech of Anshe Maisa, people who pay attention to their Maisim. Derech Anshe Maisa, Lehis Anois B'chol Erev Shabbos, to fast on Erev Shabbos. Why? Lekavod Shabbos, to make sure that they come into the seudah mit an appetit. Says the Mishnah Berurah Cotton Yudches, Lehis Anois, why? Kadesh Yutevim Lecha Balayla. But V'ayin Babach U'Magen Avram U'Shar Achroinim. Take a look at the back, the Magen Avram, other Achroinim as well. She'eskimu, who agree to Ein Le'Yisanois Be'erev Shabbos, that we should not fast on Erev Shabbos. Why? Kedei Shelo Yikanis L'Shabbos Kishuhu Me'uneh. Because if you fast on Erev Shabbos and you're not going to eat until the seudah Shabbos Friday night, that means that you're going to come into Shabbos fasting. So that means you're going to start Shabbos in a situation of discomfort. You don't cause yourself to be in discomfort on Shabbos, lekavod Shabbos. So therefore, these Akrayim say, don't do this, don't fast into Shabbos. Unless you're such a delicate, sensitive person, that if you eat anything at all during the day, you're not going to eat Friday night with an appetite. If you're such a person that if you eat an egg on Friday morning, you're not going to eat your seudah Friday night with an appetite, so then then it would be a good minhag if it's at least not going to harm you. Okay, before we go to Sif Daled, since we do have some time over here, it's a relatively short page today, I want to take a look at another biur halacha. Biur halacha dibur hamaschel mitesha shois ulamayla. So in the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Yud Zayin, we learned, the Mishnah Berurah said, listen, this is Siman of tesha shois ulamayla, that's on an Erev Shabbos of normal length. But if you're on one of the really short Erev Shabbos during the winter, then don't go by the tesha shois shire. Instead, you have to be shire on yourself. How late on Erev Shabbos can I be kaveh seudah? How late can I sit down and wash and eat a meal without harming my appetite for the Friday night seudah? Says the Mishnah, says the Chafetz Chaim, the Biur Halacha, Dibur HaMaschel Mitesha Shois Ulamayla. I am in Mishnah Berurah where I told you that din. Vatam, the rationale for this is, says the Chafetz Chaim, Da'af shetzarich lachshav shois maniyos. While it's true that really this tesha shois is just a mathematical cheshbon, just crunch the numbers and figure out when tesha shois is, and that's the zman that the Mechaber gives tesha shois. Hainum she'ena yom katzer harbe. That's only when you're not dealing with a very short Erev Shabbos. Avol kisha yom katzer ma'oid. But when the day is very short, ubevada liya toiv lecha balayla achar achilosei seudah regila, and you certainly are not going to have an appetite if you sit down in the 8th hour of the day and wash and have a normal seudah, so then certainly you can't do this. This would be no different than the halacha of an istinus, a delicate person. We learned in Hilchas Pesach that a person is not supposed to eat on Erev Pesach if it's going to damage his ability to eat the matzah by the Seder. And while it's true that when we're dealing with the chiv daraisa of eating matzah, we're talking about something which is much more chamor. Over here, we're not dealing necessarily with chiyuv daraisa. We did have a question of whether the karasa l'Shabbos oinig is a daraisa or derabanan, but l'chayre this isn't as chomer as matzah. Aval al kol panim mitzvah ikka. So if we see that by an istinus on Erev Pesach, we say that don't eat on Erev Pesach if it's going to damage your ability to eat the matzah b'teyavain by the Seder night, and we don't go with the strict calculation of Tisha Shois. V'avshem emes gam istinus ein tzarech lehis anis b'Erev Shabbos ki mitzad midas chasidus zayin is gomer. Ma'asheike b'nina didandu rak b'hagdama ba'alma b'vadei mitzvah lasis kein. Certainly, it would behoove you at least on a mitzvah basis not to eat late in the day on a short Erev Shabbos, even if it's earlier than Tisha Shois, if it's going to harm your appetite. Now let's move on to Sif Dalet. Says the Mechaber, Im kibul alav lehis anois be'erev Shabbos. If somebody was mekabel on himself a tainus yochid, we learned tilchas tainus, a person has the ability to accept upon himself a tainus for various reasons. He has a reason that he wants to fast, he has the right to be mekabel a tainus. Let's say somebody was mekabel tainus on Erev Shabbos. Now, being mekabel tainus on Erev Shabbos is immediately fraught with a difficulty, because normally when you fast a tainus, when does the tainus end? The tainus ends after the end of Ben Hashmashas. It ends by Tzeisa Kechavim. Now that's already into Shabbos, so that means that you're fasting on Shabbos. So, if somebody was mekabel tainus on Erev Shabbos, the question becomes, when should he properly end his fast? Says the Mechaber, Im kibul alav lehisanis be'erev Shabbos, if somebody was mekabel tainus on Erev Shabbos, tzarech lehisanois ad tzeisa kechavim. The Mechaber says he has to fast until tzeisa kechavim, even though he's going to go into Shabbos fasting. Im loy shepirish b'shas kabbalas tainus, unless he verbalized and he spoke out when he was mekabel tainus, ad sheyashlimu at tzibur tfilasan. If he said that I'm going to end the tainus at the end of davening Friday night, so then he could break his tainus earlier. Now that would be true even if he made early Shabbos. So then he's getting to end his tainus, so to speak, earlier. But now he could end his tainus with the beginning of Shabbos. He's mekabel Shabbos, he davens Mariv, and now he can end his tainus right away. But he doesn't have to wait till Tseis. Says the Mishnah Berurah, at least this is the opinion of the Mechaber. We're going to see in the next shire, Mir Hashem, the Shitas Haramah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting your test. Sarach le'esanis. Says the Chavetz Chaim, u'kamayim kibel tainus star b'shayim me'ashvua. This is always the halacha of a kabbalas tainus yachid, or at any day during the week. The dina hu ad tzeisa kechavim dafka. Whenever somebody is mekabel tainus, he has to fast until tzeisa kechavim. V'loy mahani b'masha hispal tfilas arvis mikaydim. A lot of people daven mincha ma'ariv, right? So they daven mincha right before shkia. They daven ma'ariv right after shkia. They're ending ma'ariv before tzeisa kechavim. If a person was mekabel tainus yachid, he can't end his tainus after he finishes ma'ariv. He has to wait until tzeisa kechavim and end his tainus then. That's always true. So that's why the Mechaber is saying over here, that would be true on Erev Shabbos too. That's the Shita Mechaber. You can't break your tainus after you daven ma'ariv. You have to wait until tzeisa kechavim. Ukid l'kaman b'sivan tafkov samach beis if alafu beis. Hu hadin hach on Erev Shabbos. Ve'enay nechshav li'isser mamasha nichtas l'Shabbos. You're coming into Shabbos fasting. Says the Mishnah Berurah, according to the Mechaber, that's not considered as an isser. Afagav the b'yam Shabbos gufa asar le'esanois. Even though you're not allowed to fast on Shabbos, but it's a tainus yachid that you mekabel on Erev Shabbos, so you have to fast until the end of Erev Shabbos, which is after Ben Hashmashas, tzeisa kechavim. Ois katan chav, im loy shepirish, unless he said beferish, he verbalized, and he spoke out when he was mekabel tainus, that I'm going to end my tainus when the tzibur finishes davening. Va'oz mutter afilu oid hayom gadol. Then you could break your tainus after ma'ariv, even if it's early in the day. So you davened the mincha before plag, and then you were mekabel Shabbos and you davened ma'ariv. So you davened ma'ariv before shkia, right? You could still break your tainus yachid right when you finish davening. Why? Because you made it tonight when you were mekabel tainus. You said, I'm only being mekabel tainus until after the tzibur finishes davening. The truth is, it doesn't have to be that he said beferish that I'm fasting until the tzibur finishes davening. He could have been mekabel tainus, and he could have made it tonight that I want my tainus to end after mincha gedola. Now, mincha gedola is very early. Mincha gedola is the earliest time you could have a mincha, which is a half hour after chatzos. So that's very early. The truth is, a person can be makabel tainus that way too. I'm being makabel tainus until mincha gedola. So yeah, you could be makabel tainus until mincha gedola. You could be makabel tainus until after the tzibur finishes davening. So again, the shita of the mechaber is somebody was makabel tainus in Erev Shabbos. It's a tainus like any other tainus. He's got to fast all the way until tzesek yechavim, even though he's going to come into Shabbos kishu ma'uneh. He's going to come into Shabbos uncomfortable because of a tainus. He has to do it anyway. That's the shitas hamachaber, unless he beferish made it tonight. Otherwise, okay. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Schus of limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The Baruch Shem should send Yeshua's refuas panasit shetuchim to those in need. We should be zeichet to see the Bias Gal Tzedek b'meher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.